Good afternoon, my name is Paul Treadwell. I work for Cornell Cooperative Extension up at the Cornell campus. And it's great to have you all here today, so if you could just introduce yourselves and...
I'm Pagham, and I was a county agent here from about 1956 to 1982 when I retired. And I got to know a lot of people here, but actually I was hired because I'd had some extension experience. And Clarence Pagham, who was the agent here at the time, knew he would be busy trying to build the Farm and Home Center originally. So that's how I came to Broome County. They wanted someone with experience, and I filled the bill at the right time.
Well,
So I'm glad I did, and
well, I'm glad you're here
I
today.
had 25 years of very wonderful memories of what went on.
Dave Bradstreet, retired from Cornell Cooperative Extension as of about 6 weeks ago. And I'm so happy to see Cleon today. What am I talking? Pads, Clarence. Clarence, the two C's, Clarence today. And Clarence is a very special person. I spent my entire career, everywhere I went, I heard about Clarence, who was a living legend in his own wake. Clarence retired in April, and I started in the position in July. And between the two of us, we have about 67, going towards 70 years of 100 years of extension experience here.
I'm Charlie Waldron. Been involved in the extension for, 66 years, since I started 4-H at 9. I was hired as summer assistant 4-H agent in 1958 to help 4-H move into the building. And this guy was here across the hall from the 4-H at the time. When I graduated from Cornell, I started farming, and he helped us build two different barns, one in Dannycook and one in Aquaga. The one in Aquaga, he took us on a ride to Plum Bottom Farm near State College, Pennsylvania, to see a drive-through freestall barn. And we built the first one in Broome County, and I think the second one in New York State. The first one was on the Agway Research Farm.
Yeah.
And then we abandoned that and went to Orleans County and farmed, where his cousin was our extension agent, right? Nate?
Yeah.
Nate Herding.
Right.
Heritage.
So we go back quite a ways.
I'm Mike Olin. I've been involved with extensions for about 51 years, starting in 4-H. My dad had a dairy farm, and I got to know Pads through that when he'd come out and visit, and we had questions or whatever, and assist us with different things. When David said they announced David had somebody special introduced, I looked, I said, can't be. That's the only first thing I can think of it can be. But I still farm part-time, and I have many memories of him coming out to the farm and meeting with us and working with us over the years.
So Pat, can we go back and talk about, and you said you started in 1956?
Yeah.
What did you do before that?
Well, before that, after the war, I went to work in Rensselaer County for a while. Then I went down to Ulster County,
For extension?
Extension. And then I left Extension for my own business. And that failed, and so I got back in Extension. I knew when I had a good thing coming.
There you go.
When I was hired, they were looking for a extension agent with some experience, and I seemed to fill the bill.
Okay.
And the reason they was because Mr. Barber was going to be pretty busy for the next 3 years. And then he planned to go on sabbatic. And so I had my job for 3 years, and I kept it for another 23.
So David, you entered just after he left?
2 months later.
Took his job, yes.
You took his job?
Took his job.
How do you feel about the guy who took your job?
Well, I said to the agent, to the farm extension office, that they asked me what I looked for in the future. And I said, well, one of the things that we need to do, and I'm not your man, is to have someone with more experience in veg crops. So I got him his job.
There you go.
There you go.
Well, that's true. I came from an area, and a lot of my experience was in vegetable and fruits, and along that line, and filled in doing the field crops to go along with that. And back then, we had a 2-county team,
Yeah.
so it seemed like I inherited fruit and vegetables for about the surrounding 3 or 4 counties, because again, in the southern tier, that wasn't a very, popular thing at that time.
And Charlie, how did you come into the picture?
How did I come into the picture?
Yeah.
My grandfather's grandfather
Uh-huh.
came to Nanticoke and cleared it in 1820s. And I came along over a century later. We still own some of that original homestead. As I said, I was involved in 4-H, and then in the 60s I was involved here. I also was on the State Advisory Board for Extension for 2 terms, 6 years. Moved to Orleans County, farmed out there till my father had a stroke, and somebody had to do something with the old homestead.
Yeah.
And I should mention, my father was chairman of the Broome County Board of Supervisors
Wow.
when the building was built. And he and Prof. Olmsted, and probably Prof was president of the association then,
Uh-huh.
had a lot of time together and figured out how to get the county to kick in their share of the funding for it. So then, when I came back to the county, I left my cows in Orleans County and started working for Farmers Home Administration. My office was next room down the hall. Different times worked in Norwich, Cortland, Ithaca, and they wanted me to go to Penn Yan, and I took an early retirement. Became an appraiser on my own, and so the last 15 years I've appraised 1,300 farms in 31 counties.
In New York State.
All New York State.
Wow.
Yep. All but 2 counties north and west of the Catskills I've worked in. So that's my background in
Yeah.
farming.
And Mike, let's just grab a of yours.
I say my dad started farming late 40s. Actually, where he started farming was where the new Windsor High School was. So I say new, it's new to me, but I've been there 30-some years or 40 years, I can't remember, late 70s. But when he moved up and bought the farm where he milked for the majority of my life, I moved up there when I was 4. At the time, it was a 90 tie stall barn, but Dad utilized extension for a lot of stuff. I believe when he was still in Windsor, they, at that time, didn't think you could plant alfalfa on River Flat, because that would never grow there. He kind of proved them wrong. But he had a very successful dairy farm. We sold out in '88 through our own choice, not through the buyout or anything. We had a neighbor that wanted to buy the real estate, but I still own 75. My wife and I still own 75 acres. I still farm part-time, but like I say, I've been in extension since I started with 4-H, and I serve on the board now, and I've past board president, been vice president before, so it's, I've enjoyed the ride.
So, given the decades of experience that we're sitting here talking to, what have you seen change over your lifetime in agriculture and working with extension? What are the biggest changes you've noticed?
Yeah, the technical change in farming has just been outstanding. I can remember when I first came here to this county, John Deere had a two-cylinder, and it was a substantial tractor, and so I used to object to the putt-putt sound of it, but I had to tell the farmers that they better get used to it, that it was a good tractor, and at that time, I think probably it was probably the most well adapted to this situation around here. Then Charlie talked about the loose housing, we called it in those days, pen stabling. When that came along, that relieved the caretaker of a lot of individual work with the cows. And I was afraid that they would be thinking every cow was alike. And that was not true. Even I, who was a specialist in field crops, I knew better than that. And but still, I guess they didn't. They're running 400 and 500 cows to a dairy farm now, and it's
And a lot more than that, yes.
yeah. But they're getting results on high production. When I first came here, there were 600 dairymen shipping to New York City. And I was hired to help them, help them out. So I helped them out. And when I left, retired, there was 200. And that wasn't because I was such a poor agent, but just the times. And I think it was the effect of the rapid adoption of new materials and new ways of doing things.
How did that transition from 600 when you started to 200, how did that change the nature of your work and the work of extension?
Well, I guess I didn't change, and that's why I retired.
Well, then let's throw that question to David.
I think when you look at the 50s and 60s after the war, I think just society as a whole changed dramatically then. And once the intellectual efforts were all pointed in other directions instead of the war effort, everything from agriculture to just home living to everything else just accelerated with all kinds of innovation, unbelievable. Yeah. And of course, the 60s was about discovering stuff and implementing and trying stuff. And then you hit the 70s, and that was all about, plant every acre you can, row to row, and fill it, and we're going to feed the world and all that kind of stuff. And then we hit the 80s, and everything changed altogether. In about mid-80s, we had a significant financial change that really took a toll on family farms, bigger than anything I'd seen. Of course, I was still fairly young then, but again, I think the 50s and the 60s were just a huge innovative time in all directions. It just accelerated everything. And then came the 70s and the 80s, and they started, targeting stuff and putting it to work. And today we make more milk than we did when I started work, and there's only, I want to say 41 farms shipping or something like that.
Really?
Yeah, on the other hand, the biggest farm is milking 2,400 cows, so
So we've gone from 600 in 1956 to
43, and we're shipping more milk. And the other thing is, when I started, if you had a 15 or 16,000 pound herd average, you were doing pretty darn good. Tops was, occasionally you'd see somebody pushing 17 or 18. Today you see these herds that are pushing 33,000 pounds. Yields, things that, you know, we just never, you know, you used to have those great years once in a while when you pushed 28 tons and 5 tons of shell, corn or something. Today we can push those all the time if the weather's with us.
Charlie, what have you noticed? as the-
Well, I shared this in our egg thing. I'll expand a little more on it. Sometime during the 60s, when I was farming in Nanticoke, I went through the old egg census data and figured out that there'd been about the same number of cows in Nanticoke every decade through the 1900s. And in 1960, that was 30-some dairies averaging around 6,000 pounds per cow. We're down to the point where there's just one farm shipping milk in Nanticoke, shipping 2 to 3 times as much as the 30 were in 1960. We rent our farm to another farm from Lyle that's milking twice as many cows as Whitaker's are, somewhere around 1,200. And they have 100 acres of corn on our farm. They pulled in about 2 o'clock one afternoon and had it all planted, disked and planted before they went to bed that night. And you'd think slam banging so fast, and we measured a 14-foot stalk out of the field.
Really?
It's just unbelievable.
In '66, we were farming, Dad was farming with 3 tractors, the biggest 40 horsepower. And we were looking for a bigger tractor at the time, and we went from a 40 horse to a 100 horse tractor, and everybody says, oh my God, what do you need a tractor that big for? Because you're nuts, you know. But I'll tell you, I still own that tractor. But it's just the technology from then till today blows my mind. I mean, I can still work on that tractor. You know, the people that bought our place have self-propelled, everything's self-propelled basically. But a year ago, they had a new chopper, and where I live, I'm right on top of a knoll that's kind of a blind curve. People have been killed there over the years. And I'm sitting in the house one day and I hear this engine running. I've got 2 driveways, and I said, what the heck's going on? Well, they're taking a chopper from one field to another. Something in the computer screwed up and it locked up, and there it sat right in the middle of the road for about 45 minutes. That's while they're on the phone to Germany trying to figure out how to move this thing. It's all computerized, and there was something that they had a fluke in it, and I mean they went from we were milking 140 cows when we sold out in '88. The neighbor that bought the place is milking about 250. Right now on the home farm, they're milking 1,600. They've got another satellite farm they're milking almost 800 at. It's still a family-owned farm. It's an LLC, or I believe it's an LLC, but it's still family-owned. You couldn't pay me enough to have those headaches. Labor, you know, equipment, you know, just the investment just blows your mind. But I mean, when we first started, you know, back in the '60s, you might see pads out there 2 or 3 times a summer, 2 or 3 times a year. When we got out, if we saw you once, you know, you do everything over the phone or whatever. And that was before we got into email and stuff back then, really. But it just amazes me. You know, you go out and look at some of these prices on new equipment. For instance, a rake that only rakes 1 windrow. I looked at the farm show list on it, $15,000. I felt pretty good because I only paid $1,500 for one I bought, but it does the same job.
Yeah. a lot of what we do with ag and whatnot is developing new technologies and then bringing them out to the farmers and saying this is the best way to do this. And then now you look at, you have farms that are 1,600 cows, you have one farm where before you might used to have had 5 or 6.
Well, ours, when we sold out, we basically had parts of 5 different farms when we sold.
So where, Extension was involved in that process of helping to facilitate this transition to a very large and centralized farming.
Well,
Now,
I think that, I hope that we left it up to the individual farmer, but pointed out to him the consequences of not adapting
Mhm.
and the consequences of just adapting, and let them make their own choice. I hope so, but probably not.
Well, I'm gonna agree with Pat. I think it's really about helping people think through options, and then people have to make their own choices at the end of the day, so.
Charlie, anything to say on that?
What's that?
Anything to say on that?
Well, when I decided to sell a farm in Aquaga, Clayton Barber and my banker, Art Lord, came out to try to talk me out of it.
Uh-huh.
They probably were right. But I had to try to farm out in the Central Plain. And, I liked farming there. I didn't like being that far from the family, and my wife didn't like being that far from her family, even less than I did.
Yeah.
And so that's essentially why we came back. But I would say that the talking through the decisions,
Mhm.
not necessarily the technical help from Extension, but the decision-making, and here's your options, and helping lead you to decision is the best help that Extension ever did for me.
Okay.
A facilitator, is that what you're trying to be?
Well.
Yeah. But that's, and I just did an appraisal of a farm in Broome County. And I walked in and sat down around a table with their banker and an agronomy person and a feed person to talk about doing that appraisal. And that's where we're at with farming now.
Yeah.
I mean, it wasn't a table, it wasn't a dining room table, it was in the farm office.
Office, yeah.
Yes.
I like something that Mike said that I think is very important, and that is, these are family farms, even though they're huge.
Exactly.
And they're not corporation farms, and that's the way the popular media would prefer to use them, but I think they're still family farms. Just
That
huge.
message is not, we're not getting that message out.
Mm-hmm.
I don't understand that.
Well, it's hard though, because in I think most people's mind, when they think of a family farm, they think of the farmhouse with the red barn with the tractor, and it's a very small
Right.
operation. And this is the family farm. This is
Right.
the backbone of America. And when you drive past a farm that is got a large manure pit and is goes on for what seems like miles of barn and just 1,600 cows,
Right.
that image doesn't resonate. That's not the Norman Rockwell picture of
Right.
agriculture.
Yeah.
But this is 1950 either.
Well, that's
Yeah.
yeah.
And the other thing everybody needs to remember about, the reason farms went out, and we talked about this earlier, is you still gotta make a living.
Right.
You gotta ride the waves, and if you don't ride a wave, then you're not farming anymore. So the best land in the farm stays in farming with somebody else, the other farm grows up the trees.
When you look to the future, when you think of the next decade, when you think about extension and the work that we're doing, where do you think we should be putting our efforts? Where should we be focusing? How can we do the most good?
Well, I don't think I'm gonna be alive, and I have no
That's your
idea.
That's pessimistic.
I have no idea how extension can continue to meet the needs. I don't even think about it.
Oh,
No.
now you're down in Florida and you're just hitting the links and doing all that sort of good stuff.
So he's windsurfing.
That
He's
wins-
got his wetsuit on and he's windsurfing.
Well, what about you guys? What do you think?
I'm incredibly excited because I think there's so many good things happening in agriculture right now. You know, back in the early 80s, we had about 25 people who did direct marketing in fruits and vegetables and stuff. And now we have probably 150 places doing it, and more popping up every day. And the general public is really interested in where their food comes from and what they're eating and everything else. Now, I don't know if that's a wave that will run itself out in 10 years or not, but there are so many opportunities for people to get started today on a part-time, small basis. So I guess I separate out the farm community a little bit, the bulk commodities, because that's just financially so hard to get into, versus all these other opportunities in ag tourism and direct marketing and specialty crops and specialty animals. And I just think it's very exciting right now. It's in fact, you know, I feel like there's like been a new awakening. We just came out of 15 years of kind of surviving and just, I don't want to call it drudgery, but you know what I mean?
Oh, I know.
A lot of exciting things going on right now.
Charlie?
Well, I guess I would agree with that. My son is on 1 acre of land next door to us, extremely interested in vegetables. Not the one who would call up and ask Dave Bradstreet a question. He'd check it online somewhere. So that's where we're going. Another place we're going, between my place and Cortland, there's about 40 Amish farms that almost all were out of business before they came. They could use a lot of good advice. I know in Yates County, where I did work, I didn't move there, but I did work there for about 4 years. They're Mennonites, but they were very much involved in cooperative extension and trying to learn how to use what we knew, but within their principles. And with the big wave of organic, even my wife, I'm not so sold on organic myself, but my wife is very much sold on it. What an opportunity for those people who farm that way to create organic vegetables and milk products and so on. And I think there's an opportunity for extension to help them in that process.
Yeah, I agree with basically what both of them said. There's so much information on the internet at your fingertips if you're that savvy. I'm not. But the thing that I am leery of on the internet, is this somebody's opinion or is this fact? And that's where I think extension can come in. Because I see a lot of things on the internet when I am on it, if my daughter's on it or something, I'll look at that and say, I don't think so. I said, that's not the case. Well, with the farms being family farms, not corporations. But yeah, there's a family corporation. As far as niche marketing and the smaller specialty farms, there's a lot of opportunity there, and I think myself, I'm sure there's, right now I grow a little bit of sweet corn and I grow hay. There's a lot better use for that land if I want to put the investment in it. I would like to, my wife not so inclined to do that, so probably won't do it because I've been married 30 years, I'm not going to jeopardize that. I don't want to. She has a problem doing a couple things that make a lot of sense, I can't talk her into, but,
You're talking about the beginning of time.
Oh, yeah,
The wife
right.
says no, it's over,
Right,
just give it
right.
up
Now we're
and
gonna
go
talk
out.
about marriages? That would be here all afternoon. My
but
God.
I would like, I have thought and considered, you know, putting some meat goats on, or sheep, something like that, to help utilize, to market the hay through the animal instead of direct. But there again, you know, they've got classes down here that, you know, to explore that stuff. I'm pretty confident I know which way I want to go, but if you could ever get her to talk to me, I doubt it, but.
Well, bring her to the classes and extension.
Right, well, she does go to some, she wants to get into beekeeping, which is fine, I get stung, she doesn't, so it's no big deal.
I think one of the things we've seen is smaller new farms use extension for more technology and actual sight vision of things. Larger farms are more interested in help with regulations, ag districts, all those kind of things. And, you know, it's kind of,
It's not the highly technical part of farming that the those 40 farms
Right.
need help with.
right?
They have those people I talked about around the boardroom table
Right.
helping solve those problems. They need to be able to deal with Donna Lepardo and so on, and communicate to them what their needs are. So, yes.
That's great. I don't want to take too much time here, but is there anything else you'd like to say? Any parting words of wisdom you have for the younger generation?
Well, I think that, to me, this younger generation is,
There's a lot of them.
yeah, tremendous opportunities and responsibilities. And I've got 2 great-grandchildren of my own, about 10 and 12. And I think they're going to rise to the occasion. They're smart.